You know, it wasn't too long ago when Italian football redeemed itself by winning the Euro 2020, and deservedly so. With a decent core of youth and experience, this team was gonna go far. With a brilliant football, this team proved that Italian football wasn't just about defending for 90 minutes. And yes, there are still people who have that perception, just because they watched 2 games in the 90s. Anyway, times were good, but fast forward to today, Italy is gonna miss the World Cup for the second time in a row. One time was disastrous, but second time in a row? Honestly, I still haven't digested it yet. But the question is Italian football dead? And does Italian football need a total revolution or just an evolution? Well, let's take a stock on what's going on in Italian football today. Listen, at the end of the day, results don't lie, and losing to North Macedonia is pretty bad. If there's one thing that we know, is that football is about fine margins. Italy had 32 shots against North Macedonia's just 4, yet failed to convert a single one of them, and still lost 1-0. They wouldn't even be in the playoffs in the first place if Jorginho hadn't missed penalties both home and away against Switzerland. Do you see a pattern here? So clearly, this is a team that creates plenty of opportunities, so sacking the coach or blaming the midfield isn't gonna solve any problem. But it does point to a very obvious problem. Today, and I would say for quite a while now, Italy has been missing a true number 9 up front. And it's fair to say that Italy won the Euros despite not having a brilliant number 9 in the squad. I still don't know what happens to Ciro Immobile when he wears the Italian jersey, but he's not the goal machine that we see in Lazio. As for those who say Mancini was too loyal to the players who won him the Euros, that was just 8 months ago. We're not talking about Marcello Lippi bringing back the 2006 stars 4 years later in 2010. Mancini barely had 2 days of training to prepare for this match, so it's normal that you stick with what worked for you. And making radical changes up front when he was already forced to revamp the entire defense wouldn't be the best of ideas. Speaking of Mancini, while he should shoulder a portion of the blame, I think he built something special here. Young players like Barella, Bastoni, Tonali, Calabria, Locatelli, and Chiesa are already important players for Milan, Inter, and Juventus. While it'll be interesting to see how players like Scamacca and Raspadori develop, and let's not forget about Donnarumma. While he could have certainly done better on the North Macedonian goal, we've already seen what he's capable of during the Euros and while he was in Milan. And honestly, that's not a bad young core to have, at all. I think the Italian national team is in good hands for the next 4 years, if for God's sake we find the number 9. That being said, things are not that rosy for Italian football, and we definitely have grassroots issues, which I'll definitely touch on later in this video. But much like the national team, Italian clubs haven't had the best of times in Europe either. Milan, despite their impressive recovery in the past couple of seasons, finished at the bottom of their Champions League group, while Inter and Juventus couldn't make it past the round of 16 this season. However, all of that comes with a bit of context. You see, while Milan continued to rebuild themselves, no one expected one of the youngest teams in Europe to make it past the group of death in their first year back in Champions League, a group that had Liverpool, Atletico Madrid, and Porto in it. And there's no shame for Inter losing 2-1 to Liverpool on aggregate. Honestly, they had a fair fight against one of the best teams in Europe. Juventus, on the other hand, could have done far better than losing 3-0 against Villarreal, even in a transitional year. That being said, there's a clear underlying issue in Italian football, and it needs to be talked about. But before we talk about the key problems in Italian football, don't forget to leave a like or comment. It really helps me out with the YouTube algorithm, as a lot of time goes into making these videos. I really enjoy reading your comments. Thank you for your love and support. Alright, let's talk about some numbers. I found an interesting statistics on the number of minutes that under 21 players played for the 2019-20 season, from August to January 1st. Milan had 15.5% of their minutes to under 21 players, which is quite impressive even by European standards. But Milan is an exception here because of their young project. Now let's compare that to the clubs like Juventus having 7.9, Inter 5.3, and Napoli only 2.8%. And you can see there's a clear lack of trust in youth. A player like Nicola Zaniolo was discarded by Inter in a player exchange transfer to Roma, and ever since then, he established himself as one of Roma's key players. And this is far from the only story of this nature. I think this is where the root of the problems lay. There needs to be a systematic change to expose more youth to senior football. I don't know, dude, maybe B-level clubs like we have in Spain? Speaking of which, Juventus is the only club to have an under-23 team registered in Serie C. which is a good step to take already. I hope to see more clubs follow this trend. Recently, there's been a law that Serie C clubs can only use 16 players that are older than 23, with 2 wildcards allowed for long-serving players. That means that a squad of 26 should have at least 10 players that are under the age of 23, and that's a small step towards the right direction. It's not too aggressive for the senior players, and it promotes developing homegrown players. Overall, don't get me wrong, it sucks not seeing Italy in a World Cup. Again, while I think we need structural changes, and God knows those changes have been needed for a while, there's no need to hit the panic button, tear everything apart, and ask for a whole revolution. But certainly, an evolution is needed, and luckily, there's a solid foundation and a good core of young players to do this with. After all, the last time Italy won a World Cup match was when Luis Suarez was still biting people. And when you think about that, you gotta admit certain things have gone very wrong. That being said, handing out blame and saying everything needs to be started from scratch is an easy thing to do. And in 2017, the previous time that Italy failed to qualify, that was certainly the case. Let's not forget, Italy won the Euros, and deservedly so. Let's not take a scorched earth policy where just an evolution would do the trick. Italian football wasn't perfect 9 months ago during the Euros, and it's not rotten right now. But it is alarming for Italian football to not make the second World Cup in a row. It's clear that there's a sickness, and we're not talking about just a common cold. Whether you like them or not, the World Cup is a lot more colorful with Italy in it than out of it. It's gonna be interesting on how Italian football will take the next few steps to take.